Welcome back to Subject Across. I'm Caroline Donato, and I'm here with Pete Kratza. We are your hosts for today. Nailed it.
Yeah, that was awesome. Problem solved.
I guess. Thank you so much to our listeners for listening and giving us the feedback that you give us. It's encouraging. It's why we keep getting in the studio now frequently. I think we've recorded more episodes in the last couple of months than we did over the span of a couple of years, and that's because of you.
Yeah, we're going to try to be more consistent. And it's heartening that there are so many people from various, whether they're probation officers or prosecutors or just like people on the street that listen to our stuff. I'm surprised and gratified.
It's a responsibility that we take seriously. We didn't know who our audience was supposed to be. We had some ideas, but really this has been an organic process. And now that we see that our audience is literally everybody under the sun who cares to listen, we're going to keep rolling with it. And we're going to try to talk about things that matter to you, that matter to us, and talk about it in a way that makes sense to everyone. You don't have to be a lawyer to listen to this. We just happen to have a lot of lawyers listening to this, which again, we find to be pretty wonderful.
Yes, and that's a good segue. I did want to apologize to one of our listeners. I'm not going to name him by names, but we referenced an article that they had written. What episode was that? Do you remember? You're the one that knows all these episode numbers.
I believe it was 42. It was the Second Amendment, the full force of the Second Amendment.
Second Amendment. And I may have allowed some of my opinions to be construed so as to criticize people making arguments. That was not my intent. My intent was that I think that the standard set by the Supreme Court is ridiculous. I still feel that way, but I commend people for advocating. And Caroline and I sometimes have to advocate for positions that we don't necessarily believe personally, whether that's politics or something else. And I think that it's a sign of a good lawyer when you have to set your personal beliefs aside and advocate. And frankly, I think Caroline, I don't want to speak to your politics for the gun stuff, but you do an excellent job in terms of advocating for the restoration of gun rights, for instance.
I appreciate that.
And so again, that's an apology. I'm not going to name the author by name, but because I don't have permission to. But I did not intend to criticize the author.
No, in fact, I think it is it's something to be commended, the author of that article and that lawyer and that level of advocacy. So thank you for that continued advocacy. It's something we actually admire and we strive to replicate. All right, so for today's episode, this is actually a little impromptu. We've mentioned we're members of the Pennsylvania Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and as PACDL members, we're part of a listserv, and it's all of us across the Commonwealth, and we share it's like a wealth of information. And one of the things that came across our emails early this morning was an article by Penn Live, by Joshua Vaughn of Penn Live, and it was published. What's today? I guess it was published 2 days ago, because today is March 15th that we're recording this episode. And it's entitled, "Dauphin County Cut Power to Men in Jails Whole for 2 Weeks. Quote, darkness creates depression." And upon just seeing the title of this article, I was totally intrigued. And I looked at it through a lens of mental health. It just triggered a topic that I wanted to talk about to everybody, which is mental health. Pete, on the other hand, read this article and didn't feel so strongly.
Because Pete's heartless.
So I'll go through the article a little bit, but I think it's a tangent I want to bring towards the ultimate goal of discussing mental health. But the article reads as follows. The lights went out for men living on 2 segregation blocks in the basement of Dauphin County Prison late last year and stayed off for more than 2 weeks, Penn Live has learned. That left them in the dark for at least 14 hours each day. On top of this, men on the block were stripped down to just a t-shirt and underwear, according to 2 people incarcerated there. Their personal belongings were taken out of the cell, including tablets, writing materials, and legal paperwork, some of which represent protected communications between the incarcerated men and their attorneys. Without tablets, the men had no access to religious texts, the law library, or any incoming mail that their loved ones sent, because mail goes to a processing area off-site and its contents are uploaded to the tablets. And let me put a pin in it there. So let's set the scene. People are incarcerated. Their liberties are restricted enough as it is. And those 2 gentlemen, I actually looked them up, they're pending trial. And while they're incarcerated with their liberties restricted, the lights go out, they're stripped, and all their personal belongings are taken from them. So it's not just jail being a restriction on liberty, but now it's a restriction on humanity. That's how I see it. And that's why this called to me this morning. I'm going to keep reading. Jail employees confirmed to Penn Live on the condition of anonymity. So these are the people who work at the jail. That the power was cut off, cells were stripped, including of legal work, and the orders to do so came from command staff. This went on for 17 days in November, according to, I don't want to mispronounce his first name, but I think it's Kani, Kani, Little, and Taji Abdullah, who remain locked up in Dauphin County. And those are the 2 gentlemen, by the way, that I looked up on UJS dockets. I'm not as good at reading articles the way Pete is. I'm going to read this and then insert my thoughts. But please go ahead and look up the article so you can get and maybe we'll link it to this episode so you can just read it without.
We can do that?
Yeah, we have done that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why I just jump in
Right.
with my commentary. But could you imagine, Pete, 17 days in the dark, stripped, with all your stuff gone, in a prison?
You're trying to move me. What you're doing is you're challenging me. Pete, how can you not be moved by this? No, of course, it's inhumane. And it seems to me that in reading the rest of this article, the cover-up is going to only make it worse. They've uncovered emails where the warden's trying to, sounds like Richard Nixon. He's trying to figure out who was visiting from the prison society, right, to these inmates. He is very concerned with messaging, and I think mentions the name of the author of this article as somebody that he doesn't want information to get out to. No, I think that there might be some repercussions, I would hope, as a result of this. And for those that don't know, because it took me, well, 20 years to figure out where all the counties are in Pennsylvania. Dauphin County is Harrisburg. So this is like
our capital.
Where the capital is, and this is their county prison. Like we have a prison in Chester County. This is the Dauphin County Prison, which houses people who are either awaiting trial or serving county sentences. And it sounds like that they just took it a step to decide that they were going to punish these people, and they did it in a really inhumane way.
And I'll keep reading some portions of this.
No, I'm sorry. Can I say one other thing?
Oh, please.
Their justification is, and facially it's a justification, that people were smoking, that it created a hazard, so that they needed to prevent them from having access to the outlets.
Yeah, I'll read that part, actually. Right. That's a good segue.
That's why I'm here.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're getting on board. It's unclear how many men were affected by the blackout, as county officials won't reveal the number of people they put in segregation, also known as the hole, where certain people are sent for additional punishment. Quote, "Power was cut off purposefully to certain cells because inmates were tampering with the electrical outlets to smoke, which obviously presents a serious fire hazard to inmates, staff, and the entire facility, while also presenting other dangers to those inside the facility," said county spokesperson Diane McNaughton in a statement provided last week. She refused to answer questions about taking the men's clothes and belongings, citing to an ongoing criminal investigation.
Criminal?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, but
I missed that part.
Let me give another intrusive thought. May I?
Absolutely.
Sorry to get a little hot and bothered over here by this statement, but the fact that you have to cut off electricity because men are tampering with the electrical outlets to smoke, why do they have cigarettes?
Well, maybe they're not supposed to. It sounds
well,
like
where's the oversight?
It sounds like there are drugs in this prison. There's a reference to people dying in the prison, but it just goes nowhere. Like there's somebody that says you have people dying in this prison and this is what you're doing, but they don't explore that further. The tenor of the article is that it's a troubled prison, and that they clearly had a contraband issue in terms of drugs, right? That's in this article.
Exactly. And the other aspect to it is the spokesperson didn't admit that the power was cut off until March. It happened in November. It just was recently admitted.
And I'm sure that the county spokesperson, well, I'm not sure, but what I'm deducing from this article is that they're trying to catch up, right? I don't think that all the information was given to the county. So I think she's the spokesperson, and rightfully so, is probably being pretty cautious about how much information she can relay, because I don't know that they got the whole story.
Well, and it also says that it looks like emails were leaked, and actually there's some emails that are, the screenshots of them are embedded in this article, but other emails showed Warden Gregory Briggs wanted to find out which inmates might be talking to Penn Live and what they were saying. Well, obviously from this article, we know Mr. Little and Mr. Abdullah are two of them. And
how did they get the emails, did they say? Was it a right to know thing? Or
there was a right to know request. Right. I don't know if that was part of it, but there was a right to know request. Gregory Briggs, the warden, sought the names of individuals visited by the Pennsylvania Prison Society, believing that he could indicate who was talking, reviewed calls between Penn Live and incarcerated people, and asked to hide details about problems with drugs inside the jail. Quote, "It's really disturbing that a warden of a jail in crisis, where people are dying and where there is pervasive lawlessness, is investing the time of his staff in controlling the message and outflow of information rather than dealing with the very serious problems," said Claire Shubik Richards, executive director of the Pennsylvania Prison Society. Quote, "It's really disturbing that he's diverting staff energy away from dealing with the lawlessness and violence in his facility and is preoccupied with preventing the truth from getting to the public." So yes, this is all very disturbing, but let's circle back to mental health. "We had to eat in the dark." This is from the article. "The men who languished in the basement in November said the darkness exacerbated existing problems in the jail. Darkness creates depression, said Connie Little. When you don't really have that light, I was very depressed, very stressed. The hole is located in the basement where only a small amount of light comes in through the windows during the day. It becomes pitch black once the sun goes down. We had to eat in the dark, said Abdullah. We went to the bathroom in the dark. Both Abdullah and Little said it was difficult to tell if they were given the proper medications, and said the darkness made it difficult to tell if bugs or rodents, which are a frequent complaint of incarcerated people, got into their food or beds. An inspection by the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections in May 2023 found a cockroach infestation in the jail's kitchen. Quote, "During a physical inspection of the kitchen area, the inspectors observed numerous, excess of 10, deceased cockroaches on the floor, primarily in the tray washing machine area," the report reads, noting the general unsanitary conditions of the kitchen. After being stripped of most of his clothing, Abdullah said, quote, "I was freezing down there, but I just had to put up with it. I just had to wrap up in my blanket, and I just had to put up with it." That's a resilient human being. I don't care that he's charged with a crime. Those are conditions that he had to endure. It's inhumane, and that shows a strong level of resiliency that a lot of people wouldn't be able to handle. And I think I just want to dovetail back into the mental health world of criminal cases. I mean, this is an extreme we're talking about here from this article. These are individuals who are put in the hole, which is isolation to begin with. Then the power's cut off. They're put in the dark. They're stripped of their clothes. Their means of communication are taken away. That's enough to make any normal person go mad. When anybody is charged with a crime and they come to our office, they're already under a severe amount of stress. They're charged with a crime, they're being investigated of a crime. It's a whole new world of potentially your liberty is being taken away, your reputation is going to be tarnished. It's a major impact to your livelihood. Wouldn't you agree, Pete?
Yeah, not to mention the fact that a lot of times, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed, the people we represent have an underlying mental illness.
And the fact that
which is exacerbated by being charged with a crime.
Exactly. And maybe the root of the underlying charges.
It's never an excuse unless you're insane, but legally insane. But it definitely is something that we bring to the attention of prosecutors first and then judges to try to lessen or reduce a sentence. It's mitigation.
Or negotiate an outcome that's reflective of a fair level of culpability.
I mean, geez, they have mental health treatment courts now across the Commonwealth. The court system, which is always slow to react, but I'll give it credit, it does react, now has many treatment courts, whether it's mental health treatment court, drug court, veterans court. So they are cognizant of the fact that mental illness is definitely a common factor in terms of the defendants that appear in criminal court.
And, the name defendant, I don't often use it. In fact, whenever it's my client, I don't use it. It's Mr. or Miss so-and-so because everyone is a person. Everybody housed in Dauphin County Prison is a person. Everybody accused of a crime is a person. Everybody who is the victim of a crime is a person. Lawyers are, the point of it is...
Lawyers aren't persons. You went too far.
Lawyers are robots. No, I'm just kidding. But I think it's important to just highlight mental health. I think as time goes on, especially post-COVID, it seems the stigma related to a mental health issue is being somewhat lessened.
Hope so.
I think people talk about it more. I think it's important for us to talk about. When COVID hit, I remember the quarantine of that. I'll speak freely for me. When the courts shut down, it was like my purpose was taken away, going to court every day and advocating for somebody and helping someone. And it was like a mental spiral. Well, it was like an existential crisis. What is this all about? If we're not going to court, if we're not helping people. And I remember through PACDL, and I was chair of the Next Gen committee at the time, we put together these mental health Zoom seminars. And this was back when Zoom was a novel concept, and now everything's done by Zoom. But back then it was, well, let's have a forensic psychologist talk to us about what we are experiencing as lawyers. It's kind of like what you hear about when you're on the airplane. We have to put the masks on ourselves before we put the masks on our clients. Parents put the masks on themselves before the masks on their kids. But mental health, nobody is immune to the reach of a mental health crisis, and that includes people incarcerated.
On a lighter note, can I?
You can do whatever you want. You're also a host.
So, have you ever been to the restrictive housing unit at the Chester County Prison?
I haven't.
Our equivalent of the Hole?
No.
So, before I started working with you, I had a criminal case that derived from an incident in the Hole, the restrictive housing unit. And me being a diligent young lawyer, and it was a multi-defendant case, I decided that I needed to visit the scene of the crime because the allegation was, none of this is privileged, the allegation was that my client had thrown what I will call a defecation projectile. That's not what they called it in the prison, but that he had thrown a defecation projectile from his cell and hit a guard. And he was charged with aggravated assault and, whatever the bodily excrement statute is. It's like nasty stuff because you could get somebody really sick.
Is this when you were a PD or is this private counsel?
I think it might have been a court-appointed case. The client was very difficult. But the point is that the defense was that he would have had to have been like Tom Brady to have thrown his projectile from his cell to hit the guard, because he only had like a little tiny window, and I'm in there in the restrictive housing unit. No, I'm not holding a excrement projectile, but I am
defecation projectile of your own.
They called it a SHIT bomb. That's what it was called. I never know what we're allowed to say in this podcast. So, but I'm in the cell, and I'm like trying to like figure out how I could have possibly thrown a poop bomb through this thing, and I'm having a guard stand over there. And meanwhile, all of the prison's worst behaved people are still in the restrictive housing unit. Like, the guards got a real kick out of the fact that this young lawyer in his suit and tie was going into the restrictive housing unit. I loved it. But it helped get a much more favorable result for him.
Did you DC that?
Because no, not quite a DC, because he had done some other stuff. Oh God, it had been like a riot. One guy like broke a sink. This humongous inmate they were all charged with like conspiracy to do, mayhem in the prison. But one of them like just broke a sink, like a porcelain. Maybe it wasn't porcelain. Maybe it was metal. But like. That reminded me, when you're talking about the hole, I will never forget my stint in the hole, which only lasted about 15 minutes.
When you were replicating this, what were you actually using?
It was just an idea of how could you possibly...
Did you bring a tennis ball? Did you bring a rolled up sock? Like what?
I don't remember what I used. But
I'm going to need to know
the prisoners at first were like kind of like, like catcalling me or whatever, like making fun of the lawyer in there. But I think ultimately they respected the fact that he had a nickname too. I forget what his nickname was. The lawyer.
Did you bring a tape measure of how far it must have gone out of the cell?
Yeah. How much did the excrement weigh? No, that was my experience in the hole.
The only hole I ever went to was at the Federal Detention Center.
Oh, and it was the hole.
It was the hole, but it was higher up. Okay, well, thank you for talking with me about mental health related to this incident in Dauphin County. I'm curious to see where this goes. And if you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about mental health and how it affects the criminal law world, not just like mental health court, but really how we use it as mitigation for a negotiation tool, we're happy to talk about it. All right, that wraps it up for this episode of Subject to Cross.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.